Hello once again, everyone, and welcome back to our Getting More Out of Angelo's Broadsword. You may notice the camera is slightly higher than it normally is. That is because we have the return of the man, the myth, the legend, the cameraman known as Bob, because I forgot my tripod at home. And also joining me once again is Jason. So, when we last left off, we were tackling Lesson 5. And Lesson 5 kind of started to introduce us to the inside and outside lines and the use of the 1 and 2 attack. Now, this is going to continue. And specifically, we're going to start dealing with not exactly our first feint, but also one of our earliest feints. And that is going to be a feint from 1 to 2 and a feint from 2 to 1, which will draw me out from the outside guard to inside and vice versa. Now, what the lesson is really about here is going to be the use of some parries that we'll be moving into, but we'll get into that in due time. So firstly, we will show the lesson in its entirety, and then we'll break it down and talk about it. So we both begin in slope as per normal. Full swordsman taken inside guard. He'll feint and then cut. And I shall switch across to an inside half hanger, which I'll do a little better this time. Return to inside guard. Begin. Defending my wrist. We then return to the outside guard for the second part of the lesson. Same deal. And once more. Excellent. So let's break that action down. So it is 2 parts and it does require a transition halfway through, but that's nothing we can't handle. So what's happening is we begin with the inside guard, which we haven't been holding up until this point. He's going to feint a 2 cut at my wrist, my exposed arm. So if he were to just go ahead and complete that cut against me, go ahead, boom, maybe a little bit sharper on the 2. You usually want to be kind of coming down onto the wrist. Go ahead and take the inside guard for me. When you go for this cut, a big thing about it is, number one, most people are going to hold their inside guard a lot more to their inside. Jason's doing a very good job about keeping it a little more centered here. Most people will kind of curl it, and some people will even end up hinging from their elbow. Now, some manuals do tell you to have your nails directly up, so this isn't a bad thing per se, but it does open up this target a lot more. So you'll get people who, when they see that target, are very quick at executing this quick cut, especially from lunge distance, and it protects me quite a bit. So that's what we're dealing with at first. He's delivering that cut toward my arm, not toward my face. So he executes that cut, and I'm going to move over into the outside guard, as we've been taught to do, to defend myself. Now at this point, I don't need to shift. The reason I'm not shifting is because he's going for my extremity, not for my deep target. So if we go back to the inside guard, if he were cutting for my head, I would want to shift to defend myself. And I honestly went a little bit higher than I wanted to on that very, but I need to move my head back because if I stay in place, my arm has to crumple and he has a better chance of blowing through. But, if we return to the inside, since he's going for just my limb, I'm perfectly safe here. I'm perfectly strong. But he's more clever than that. He's going to feint to draw me into the outside, and then he's going to execute a cut from below to take the inside of my wrist. Now, important thing here. The cut he's using can be a 3 or a 5. It's really up to him. But he goes in and draws me out. Uh-oh. Yeah, and he's just taking the inside of that arm. Now, Jason was probably anticipating me to move. Surprise, right? So he ended up cutting me a little deeper. What you want to be aiming for is anywhere from the elbow to the inside of the wrist. So go ahead and just take that target area. Boom. Yeah, it's nice and inside. That'll catch me out pretty well. And you can make this cut particularly tight. So I'll do it to you, Jason. Okay? We're on the inside guard. I am going to feint really tight, where I am just kind of circling around his blade and then extending. You can also see this movement done with its reverse if you start getting into page. Maybe one day we'll get into page. But either way, cut to arm, cut to arm. Very, very good. Very good if you're used to fighting with a lighter saber as well. But I'm now going to use that concept I talked about, which is the idea of a sweeping parry. There's a bunch of different parries you can do. So for example, if he cuts for just my limb and just stays there, that's just a moving into guard kind of static parry, right? Sets me up for a riposte, no problem. Another option is I could deflect it by either beating the parry or expulsing it. So once again, he's going to cut from outside. I add just a little bit of juice into it to kind of knock his sword down, then took an opening. Something else I could do would be to kind of slip through it. This time I'm going to do a different parry, please cut the same opening. He cuts. So that's one you're not really going to see a ton outside of the cavalry, but the idea being I'm rolling off of the parry. We'll be seeing that when we go to the inside line later. But the parry I'm going to be doing to defend against this wrist cut is that his sword is going to be moving kind of in this area between us, and specifically it's coming up from below. The problem with the cut coming up from below is that absolutely, I could still use an inside guard or an outside guard or what have you to defend yourself, but since he's moving very tightly around my sword, I need to kind of cover this area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the inside half hanger. Sorry, not the inside half hanger. The inside half hanger does a better job of this, but I'm going to use the half circle guard. So I'm going to, from my outside guard, sweep across with my tip. And this really will help, because if you try to just shove your wrist over, you're actually going to end up more here, and that's not what you want. I sweep the tip across as I shift, and that kind of covers my entire opening and gathers up his sword. So we'll show that real slow motion. Full swordsman in the inside guard, he feints, sweep. And my guard just ends up in the right place. Even if he's cutting more from my body, this will still cover, and it'll end up stuck on my basket, which is excellent for me. Now, a question that you occasionally get is, because the lesson ends here for this portion, what would you do to riposte? You kind of have free reign. I mean, I can of course point if he's in the process of recovering. I can use the point if he is also just, kind of staying there looking a little bit confused. I can unfurl into a cut, or I can unfurl into a mother of all sixes. So there are options. But that's going to be our first sweeping parry. Our second one is going to be now, he's once again going to cut for an extremity, and he's going to go for that deeper target of the flank. So let's look at that. So both swordsmen begin in the outside guard. He feints a cut, I go to defend. Now this should seem very familiar given our last lesson. Same exact things applying, just now you can go ahead and add a little bit of emphasis to the fact that you are sweeping across once again with my tip. Now, if he just cuts a 6-cut right at my ribs, it's very easy for me to parry, right? All I need to do against a horizontal cut angle, as we showed that, right? Just a horizontal cut, just puts your blade in the way. In fact, I'll even add less juice. I'm going to just cut at my ribs. Barely any sweep there. I pretty much just turn my arm over and still stop things. However, if he's doing a much more narrow 4-cut, right? So we'll show the 4-cut at first. Go ahead. Yeah, much more up and into my body. Go ahead and target the body. Go for it. There we go. That's a much harder angle for me to deal with. And if I just move my sword over, it's highly likely, even though I catch his blade, he may still be able to cut me in this little triangle that I'll leave. So I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I add that sweep to it to get it away from me. So, we're in the outside guard, he feints, much safer. Just good habit overall, gets you thinking with the tip in your parries. So, Jason and I will now go through the entire lesson together, without break, and then we shall be done. So, slow, inside. Excellent. And that's going to be lesson 6. A very useful lesson, as it goes over some new stuff. It also goes over the incredibly funny spadroon / half circle guard, one that you'll find if you're teaching people, a lot of them are like, what is this for? This finally satisfies that answer as it comes up in the manual relatively early on, and you're like, what does this do? This is what it does. And that idea of sweeping down across the space in between you is one that you're going to see a lot more in other saber manuals from various nations, as well as a big concept in smallsword and later bayonet. So, it's a very useful one to get into the habit of doing, as it's just another way of doing your parries, and especially against the point, it's going to save the important stuff down below the belt. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching. We'll go over some other techniques another time.